Hi, I'm Carrie Rose. I'm from the Roseway Consultants. The value set that comes from the schools is around that visibility of children. And so, when we're looking at documentation, one of the things that is a real tension is how much is too much, how much isn't enough, what gives the children's work real value, what are parents really engaging with, and the purpose of it. So I think for me, it's really looking at all of those elements and thinking about what are the key points or what's the key messages that, I think are really important for us to share here. Secondly, I think that children need to be really engaged in that regardless of age and ability to speak. And I think, I feel like I'm transitioning myself to a little bit of that under 3 zone quite a lot, because the children that don't have the oral language, often our documentation is not actually sharing their voice, because we're, as adults, only thinking about voice as that oral language. And so I think in terms of the documentation, it's really looking at all the ways in which children actually share voice and being very precise about how it's documented in a way of value. And that takes a lot of time. It takes experience, it takes practice, it takes very good critical thinking, because, I know myself, I've taken documentation and then kind of gone, it's good, but it didn't capture exactly what I was looking for. And that's okay. And that's still shared with the families and the children. But it's about then going, okay, I've got more to learn about this. And I think that openness to really understand that documentation is a fluid process of learning, that, what might work with one group of children over a year is a really effective way of documentation is not necessarily going to be the way you could do that the following year. And so I'm always looking for those really key perspectives. I think that's the key. The second part is slowing down, and I talk to educators a lot about this, and I believe in this completely. We have to slow down, because if we're not slowing down in the process, we are absolutely missing the key things that the children are trying to tell us, whether that's through their body language, their facial expressions, their oral language, however it might be. If we're trying to rush processes, or we're just trying to complete documentation for the sake of documentation, we are absolutely not getting the depth of thinking and the true story, I guess, from the children. So for me, those two things are really important. What am I doing? How am I doing it? How can I keep doing this better? But also slow down and truly be in the moment. And I think that's an easy thing to say. And I think every educator, every early childhood educator would say, absolutely agree with that. Being courageous to do that and to feel like, I feel like I'm just sitting here, and listening, is a whole nother story. Yeah. So I think finding the power to do that is really important for documentation.
I'm Rachel. I use they, her pronouns. I have been working in early childhood for about 15 years. I have a consultancy called Ethical Interactions, which does a range of work in the kind of wellbeing, queer advocacy space. But my particular kind of methodology is around co-design with children. And so all my programs are developed in consultation with children and teachers, the experts, to find ways to bring new perspectives into our teaching practice. Co-design comes from out of public policy disciplines, really. It's a methodology that's used, and it's becoming used more and more in policy spaces where there's been big power imbalances. So healthcare, disability, aged care, queer support services, youth services, mental health services. And it's about seeing the service user, so in early childhood, it's the child and the family, but the child in particular as the expert. And so rather than relying on adults, teachers, researchers, policymakers to project our idea of what's important to children onto children, we ask children and we position them as experts. Not the only expert, but as having a really important, unique expertise. And so through co-design, we not just listen to voices, but we inform voices, children, and we hear what they're saying, and we act on their preferences and ideas and perspectives. all while balancing their unique vulnerability. My understanding is that in Reggio we document learning to make learning visible to children, to kind of as advocacy to show children as capable learners. In co-design, we document children's perspectives in a similar way. We take our obligation to document really seriously because we see co-design as a democratic practice. And so it's about sharing power, it's about involving all stakeholders and experts, including children, in decision-making processes about matters that affect them. And so we document to provide transparency and accountability to the adults. And so we document voices, we get beyond what I call cute quotes, we get beyond just, I love my mum because she's brave, or whatever the quote happens to be, we get beyond that. And we start really documenting perspective and ideas. And we document in a transparent way how we make sense of those ideas as adults, how we're acting on those ideas as adults, how children's perspectives have informed systems and policies and programs and pedagogies and practices and environments. And we reflect that back to the children. So we are transparent to children, and we will always go back to children and talk about how they've influenced our decisions, the final outcome. I should say, not our decisions.